This week on the WriterCon podcast.
Find a tribe. Like there's a African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And I think that involving other people in your journey is a really good piece of advice.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Laura Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Hey writers, thanks for joining me and Laura for the new year. It was a quiet Christmas in the book industry, but it usually is. People aren't going into their offices and not much is going on, but there's one story that broke big. And how can I say it? I'm just going to be honest with you. I had doubts about my talent and status as a writer, but now I feel like I've made the big time because, wait for it, I've been banned in Florida. Yes, it's true. A list has been published. You can Google this. There's 670 or so books that have been banned in the state of Florida. And one of them is Dark Eye, a book I wrote that was published in 2005. And actually, I think it's one of my best books, but it got me on the A-list. What can I say? Laura, were you concerned this was going to be a crushing blow for me and my career and paying the mortgage and stuff?
You know what they say, no publicity is bad publicity, right?
Yes.
I think if anything, might actually drive some people to want to see what the big deal is about. But that's just me.
It's so not a big deal. Jesse, how did you react to this exciting news?
I mean, I feel like you kind of want your book to be banned by them, right?
Yeah.
Because they've been real. I mean, they're banning books that aren't necessarily even in schools. There's like 3 people who like nominate all of these books to be banned. It's silly, and you should use it to get more PR for this book and sell some more copies of it.
Well, this book is a thriller. I don't know really why it would be in a school in the first place. So I'm assuming it was in a public library, which makes me wonder. But sadly, they did not call me up to explain why it was being banned. It just was. All right. Our interview today is with Micah Leydorf, who just published her first book, The Unseen Battle. She's also a longtime friend of WriterCon, and many writers in the inspirational community can't wait to talk to her. But first, the news. Our first news story relates to the Tolkien estate and The Lord of the Rings, and the author of an unauthorized sequel who managed to lose in court not once but twice. We're talking now about a book written by, I'm assuming this is a pseudonym, Demetrius Polychron of Santa Monica, California, who wrote and uploaded for sale an unauthorized sequel to The Lord of the Rings. You can see the problems already. And here's what you may not be seeing. The first lawsuit was brought not by the Tolkien estate, but by the author of this essentially fan fiction, suing Amazon, because Amazon also has a Lord of the Rings series now. The only difference being that Amazon actually paid for the rights to it. So inexplicably, this guy sues Amazon and loses, of course, but that lawsuit brings the whole mess to the attention of the Tolkien estate, who had no idea before then that this guy was selling an unauthorized sequel to their, mainstream trilogy. And then they sued, and of course, he lost again. Judge Wilson found direct evidence of copying as well as obvious appropriation of the IP. and ruled against him. And I don't know what the judgment is going to be, but he has definitely been found with infringing on the Tolkien estate, which is a crime that I would assume outrages you, Jesse.
Listen,
no one knows more about Tolkien than you do.
Listen,
what do you think about this?
I am this podcast Tolkien expert. I wouldn't say I know as much as other people, but I don't understand this person's strategy, because there was no way, like, you're using someone else's IP and then you're suing the people who paid money to use that IP to make a very expensive TV show, and you think you're going to win that lawsuit? And by the way, I was doing a little research while you were talking. He did actually sue both Amazon and the Tolkien estate first. And so
they were in the first lawsuit? So that's how they found out about it.
Yeah. So
thank you.
I've got to say, dumbest lawsuit ever.
Dumbest litigant.
And against such a well-known...
research, do you know if this guy was represented by counsel? Because that's what I would want to know.
What lawyer was taking that on?
Yeah. Well, it's such a well-known and beloved IP, too, of all the things to try to sue over. I'm with Jesse. How did he think this was going to go? And he had sent this to the Tolkien estate previously, hadn't he? And I read somewhere that they had been trying to tell him to cease and desist, and he just wasn't responding. Oh, what a mess.
Although I think it was after the first lawsuit, but they definitely sent him a cease and desist letter, which he ignored. Again, wondering about the gentleman.
Yeah, I mean, his argument was that this book was very close to what Amazon ended up doing with the first season of the War of the Rings TV show, and so that was the basis of the lawsuit. But again, Amazon bought the rights to use the Tolkien estate, the appendices of the Lord of the Rings to make this show, and so I still don't think he realized, like, you're the one infringing. Like, Amazon, like, even if Amazon stole your idea, your fan fiction idea, I don't think you legally get to say you own that. It wasn't your IP to begin with.
The part of this that I focused on, which is different, of course, because it's me, but, the Tolkien estate, which is headed by his descendants, zoomed in. And I love that kind of family. This is our IP. We're going to protect it. The same thing is going on right now with the Edgar Rice Burroughs library and the family. I think it's now grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And Tarzan, sadly, is at least partly in public domain, but they're still, holding on to the family IP. And so, Laura, basically what I'm saying is I'm expecting you to manage all of my estate and, make billions for the kids after I'm gone. Okay.
Yes. Oh, heck yes. I will fight for what's ours. You know it, babe.
All right. News story number 2, which is related because I just, of course, mentioned public domain. We do this every year, early in the year. But of course, as of January 1st of this year, a new set of works went into public domain. You may have already heard that Mickey Mouse, the original Steamboat Willie version, and somebody's already making a horror film, right? Mickey's Mousetrap. But we've also seen literary works from Virginia Woolf and D.H. Lawrence go into the public domain, and popular things like The House of Pooh Corner and Peter Pan, songs, and so much more. Laura, I assume you're going to be the first in line for Mickey's Mousetrap. Am I right about that?
Oof. After we sat through the beginning of...
I was about to say the first 20 minutes of...
Blood and Honey, the wreck that was trying to pass as a movie, I'm not as excited to try Mickey's Mousetrap. I will say I took a look at it and it looked like it was going for more of a like a Five Nights at Freddy's feel, more of an animatronics going wild, but
well, they had the backstory, right? It was like Christopher Robin abandoned them all and they became like feral wild creatures and attacked the next people to show
the very first few minutes I was like, okay, I'm here for this, and then I was out fast. Somebody else is going to have to see Mickey's Mickey's Mousetrap first and then convince me that it's worth seeing. I'm not going to line up for that one.
Everybody's taking the position that, okay, Mickey's in the main, but it's only the original Steamboat Willie Mickey, the Sherlock Holmes estate. That's another family estate, by the way. The Doyle estate is still trying to cling to Sherlock Holmes long after he went into the public domain. But they're saying the early stories are in public domain, but not the later when Sherlock Holmes softens up and becomes a nicer person, which my point is that's not really been legally established. That's what people are arguing, but we'll wait and see. But Jesse, given all of the IP that's now entering the public domain, are you contemplating any projects or mashups?
Not now. Not if 100 years from now, someone else can make money off it. No.
Be sure and notify the estate first.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. What cracks me up about this is like, okay, so first of all, listeners, if someone can explain to me if Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse in that first cartoon, is that his name or is that the boat he's on? Anyway, side note.
It is the character he plays.
He's the character he plays. And I'm like, how much, yes, between then and now, the animated version of Mickey Mouse has changed a lot, but he's pretty much like basic Mickey at this point. So like Mickey Mouse is just out there now, and now we're gonna get horrible horror films and probably a weird video game. And,
even Walt Disney said in interviews that in his mind, Mickey and Minnie were actors who played different parts. When people would ask, why aren't Mickey and Minnie married? They've been dating for like 80 years. His answer was, well, they are actually at home, but then they go to work and play boyfriend and girlfriend. And if that's true, then, Mickey Mouse, no matter what costume or role he plays, is Mickey Mouse. Well,
yeah.
So you might argue.
There is a metaphysical question here about like who is Mickey and who has the rights to Mickey.
Our listeners had no idea how deep this was going to get.
Because like if early Mickey is now public domain, but later Mickey is not, like how is Mickey, right? Like if Mickey is one person, one character, like is the essence of Mickey now public domain? I don't know. This is the kind of things I think about. So
that's a good question though, because I went and looked up like the images that are already starting to be released for that Mickey's Mousetrap film, and it's like a scream mask or something. I don't look at that and think, oh, yep, that's Steamboat Mickey. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if it doesn't really look like any version of Mickey Mouse, then I saw both.
Yeah. Like,
not going to get sued.
How do you declare which Mickey you're using? This is like
exactly.
I can tie this back to Star Trek because I can tie everything back to Star Trek. Both the Enterprise, the look of the Enterprise in the J.J. Abrams films and in Strange New Worlds had to be tweaked slightly to not infringe on a copyright that one of the designers on the original TV show made for what future versions of the Enterprise were supposed to look like. And so they had to tweak different parts of it because there is a model for how the Enterprise is supposed to look. And the newer shows and movies can't infringe on it. But then again, it still looks like the Enterprise. So what is the point of that original copyright in the first place? So
I don't know. Fascinating. And we will follow these stories as they develop. But for now, Jesse, cue up the music. Let's talk to Micah Leydorf. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here too. Okay, we have a traditional first question on this podcast, and here it is. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, if you had to narrow it down to just one, what would it be?
Find a tribe. Like there's a African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And I think that involving other people in your journey is a really good piece of advice.
Yeah, I love that. But of course, as you may know, because I know you've been to WriterCon, that's what I tell people every year at the opening ceremony, look around you. You've found your tribe.
Yes. And I think the Writer Conference is such a wonderful resource for people, especially here in Oklahoma, but it's amazing to me how far people come from around the country, or even when the COVID year, there was a guy from New Zealand. I was like, really? You came from New Zealand? I think he came to get out of New Zealand, but whatever.
Exactly right. But the cool thing was that he had been listening to the WriterCon podcast, which we are on right now, and that's how he knew about the conference. And so he could only get out of the country if he had a work-related reason. So being a writer, he explained that he had to go to this conference in Oklahoma City.
I know, that was crazy.
Yeah. But back to you, Micah. You've got a book out, The Unseen Battle. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I got a copy right here. Anybody who's seeing it can see the beautiful cover. It's basically a story about well, if you're familiar with C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, and it's kind of the same idea of there's demon letters and angel letters, but mine is different because instead of being written by a British man 70 years ago, it's about an American woman in the 21st century, and the demons are seeking to destroy her marriage, and the angels are seeking to save it. And there's a lot more going on, of course. So, you know.
But
I want to talk some more about that, because I think that it's fascinating. So your main character is Abby, right?
Right.
Is
yes.
an American, like an ordinary American woman. Is her marriage already crumbling, or does it already have some cracks in it? Or
so, of course, like I've been taught at WriterCon, you want to start off with something that jumps right into the story. So I think it's already had some problems, but of course there's an inciting incident at the beginning of the story of a party that she throws, a surprise birthday party for her husband, and she does all these things and goes to all this effort and is so excited to hear what he thinks. And at the end, he doesn't say anything, and then she finally asks him about it, and he says, you almost ruined my birthday, because was any of that really for me? Wasn't that really all for you? And it just, devastates her. And so, of course, the demons use that to, drive a wedge between her and her husband. But like you say, it was kind of already starting before, but that's a little bit how it starts.
Very cool. I mean, you kind of mentioned this already, that you chose to tell this through the letters.
Yes.
Abby's journal.
Yeah.
The letters from the demons, the angels. So why did you choose that approach? What
so
was it that prompted that?
It's really kind of funny. Like, I have been working on this book for quite a few years, for about 7 years, actually. And one of the reasons why is because I've been rewriting it for a long time. And I actually came to the writer conference, and I actually spoke with an agent the first time I pitched it to anybody. And at the time, it was kind of more just like C.S. Lewis's Screwtape. It was just demon letters. Of course, with a woman protagonist, and in America rather than Britain, but it was just straight demon letters. And he's like, "Oh, there's a lot of demons. Could you do it from the angel perspective?" And I'm like, "Well, kind of need the demon." He's like, "Well, could you do both?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I can maybe do both." So I thought that was a new idea. So I went back, tried to do that. And then I came to the writer conference the next year. And I had a little one-on-one session with Renee Gutteridge, who used to be a co-host, I guess, on this.
She still is at WriterCon.
Oh, she still is. Okay,
yes.
Yeah. She's so great at fiction. And she said, "Oh, it doesn't have a lot of, plot." And I said, "Oh, well, I don't really consider it fiction. I consider it kind of like a clever way to write an essay," because, of course, that's what the Screwtape Letters were. They were actually serialized originally, and there's not much of a plot at all.
Right.
Like, well, unless you believe that demons write letters, writing fiction. It's not a whole, but that little bit was, just like, oh, okay, I need to learn character and plot development and learn that. So actually, I joined a fiction writer critique group, actually with other writers, again, talking about finding your tribe, that I met there at the conference. And it was through them, then I came up eventually with the idea. I tried narration and some various ways to get action through the story. That was like, oh, if I did a journal. So they have 3 voices. So I have the woman's journal that kind of drives the action of the story. And then, of course, the angel and the demon letter interspersed in there. And then to explain the long, lengthy time to writing. I love stories that have a twist at the end. That
Right.
you look at the whole thing differently, a la, The Sixth Sense or something. And so that idea kind of came part of one of those critique groups. And I was like, ooh, it'd be really cool if I could do that. So then I had to rewrite the whole thing to weave that through, but all there. Now it's all just right.
That's awesome.
That's
it
what
sounds to me
7
like the conference was really an excellent resource for you. You got a lot of assistance from that. I love it.
Yeah. And actually, so my little writer critique group, which again, we've been meeting for years, but we decided this past year to go on the WriterCon cruise not last year. Well, I guess it is last year now. It was 2023 in April. And I went, for the, great teaching, but then also just, again, to have time with those friends and those collaborators. And we came up with a really great idea of doing a little podcast together, stories that change us. And so now we've been doing that, and that kind of came from that time together. So yeah, who knows what ideas you come with when you get together with others. And yeah, it's really great.
I love that.
I love that.
True. I think dollar for dollar, it's the best deal around. Go ahead, Laura.
No, I just said I love that. I didn't realize that was yet another benefit that came from the cruise. That's terrific.
Oh, that's so funny that you didn't realize that, since you were in our little group there with us, helping us.
I didn't know you guys were plotting to start your podcast. That's great.
Yeah.
Now you know. Okay, Micah. Now I'm going to get all serious.
Okay.
Journalist on you and ask you the tough, hard-bitten questions, because I found an interview and you said, I'm quoting you now, in some ways, this book is both a love letter and a critique of the modern American church. Okay, what does that mean? And who are we critiquing?
Sure. Well, so again, what you have is demons, or one specific demon, Twisttail, who is advising. He's a demon who's in charge of all of the corruption in the American West, in the West, America. And he's advising a recent transfer from the East. So it's basically like, you have your jihads and genocides over there, and, you're so out in the open. But over here, this is how we do corruption in the West. So of course, he's going to be talking about the American church. He's critiquing the American church. He's saying, this is what's been successful for us. These are the lies that we have so successfully woven into the fabric of American culture and American church that, and so again, but it's done. But what I love about the concept and the tool of using story is that you can explore some of these things without people becoming defensive. So one of the things I love is in the back of the book, I have study questions. And actually I also have almost a dozen now discussion groups, which are going to be starting up soon. I've already done a lot of beta groups this past year, and they've gone really well. All from, as small as just a few women, gathering a private home, to church-wide, in between the masses every week from February through Easter, and kind of all in between. But there's study questions in the back of the book to help people to explore these issues. But I think it makes it easier if you're talking about Abby. If you're not talking about you, right? So it's a character. You're not as defensive. So it's like, okay. So it kind of just is a little bit of softening some of these, maybe a little bit harder, because if things hit a little close to home, you might again be a little defensive about it. But hopefully it's kind of like a velvet hammer, right? It's like a little softer.
Okay, here's something else I learned about you today when I was stalking you on the internet to prepare for the interview. I mean, you spent some time in the political world. But,
sure did.
Did you like that kind of? Of course, you're not doing it anymore, but still, I'll ask, did you like that kind of work?
I did. I loved it when I was there. I was on Capitol Hill. I worked for a Republican congressman from here in Oklahoma for about 10 years. I started at the bottom and basically held I started as an intern, as an undergrad. And when I finished, I was deputy chief of staff. The most of that time was spent as his press secretary. So my background is journalism. I have a master's in journalism from OU, and that's where a lot of the writing. I guess before I decided to try my hand at writing books, that's where that avenue took me. But I loved it. Living there on Capitol Hill as a young single person is super exciting, is fulfilling. But there's negatives. I mean, a little bit of this comes from that, right? And of course, it's changed. We all know, or devolved. But at the time, I loved my job, and I really enjoyed that time.
Yeah.
One of the fabulous things about Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. is there's so many amazing people there, people who come from all over, and they're all talented and exciting and interesting. And so I enjoyed that. But you get what they call Potomac fever, where you think that Washington is the center of the universe. You think that everything that's important happens there, which we all know is actually not true. And the most important things happen here, right? They happen in our hearts. And that's what this book is about.
Lovely.
Well, we have a lot of aspiring writers in our audience, which I suspect and you've talked some about how the book was written. You've talked about your path through writing it. What happened when you decided you were ready to publish? So you came several times, you got lots of good advice, you wrote, you rewrote, 7 years, I think we've said, and then you decided it's done, I'm ready to publish. How did you get started? What was that like for you?
Oh, well, everybody's avenue is going to be a little bit different. And I love how at the conference, you lay out all the options. So that's what's most important. So you can feel confident in your decision, is you're informed about all the different avenues in which, the pros and cons of each. So for me, my first book that I published, I actually was commissioned to write it by a nonprofit, the Single Parent Support Network. So it was completely different than this novel. This is my debut novel. It was interviews with 40 different single parents and a compilation of all those. But I had a nonprofit behind me, so I had that kind of platform in order to get it into the world. And so they had said, you write it, we'll publish, distribute, and market it. And so, how nonprofits are, they're kind of overambitious sometimes. And I thought, I don't know if you know how to do that. So if I'm going to do this, I want it done well. So I'm going to investigate. And that's how I actually ended up at WriterCon in exploring that. So I'd already written my first book before I ever came to the conference. But anyway, so I had done that. And I thought, okay, I know what that's like. And then, of course, going to the conference, that's how I learned, how the traditional publishing avenue goes and the pros and cons of that. So for me personally, and actually here's another speaker from the conference, and used to be our critique group leader, Robin Patchen. She's a USA Today bestselling author. I don't even know how many books she's written, like 30 something. And we had a really great heart to heart. She gave me some really good advice, and she said, my books, she said, the majority of her books, she writes Christian thriller, like romance Christian thriller, are ebooks. So people just read them and go to the next. And like my book is different. My book, she's like, your book is a book people are going to want to hold in their hands. They're going to have a physical copy. They're wanting to be able to get it at a bookstore. So all those things just drove, a different path. But I feel like the most important thing is just knowing the pros and cons of each one. So for me particularly, I ended up going the independent. And also here's another big one on that is she said your first book, and maybe, I don't know if you agree with this, maybe you can speak to this, Bill, but she felt like your first book is like a loss leader, that you're probably not going to make a lot of money on your first book, but then, hopefully you'll serialize or you'll get your name out there, you'll be building a platform. And I'm fundamentally different from a lot of the authors at WriterCon, or maybe a lot of authors in general, in that I feel a real call to this book. I feel God gave me this story. It gave me a call to get it out into the world. I'm going to use all my resources to do that. And so I don't really feel like, I'm so eager to just get the next one out there, whatever. I'm like, no,
Mhm.
I have one book. I might have two. I actually even have a little, sequel in my head, maybe, but I don't plan on just doing a ton.
That's what happens. That's what happens. Once you get one out there, the next one starts percolating. I know.
Yeah. So Robin actually was really great. And she said, if you really, you just want this one book out there and you're going to do all this work to do it, it's like, maybe you just go ahead and independently publish and you just do all that work, So that's what I'm doing.
So that's what happened.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nobody believes in your book like you do. I mean, that for every author,
true.
I feel like we are our biggest advocates. So I applaud that.
Not always our most effective advocates, but surely the person who likes the work best. Okay, Micah, the tough journalist question I tried before, you totally sailed through. So I'm going to try again. Okay. In, I don't remember it's the same interview, but some interview, you called yourself, and I quote, the wife, mother, and serial entrepreneur who writes out of obedience. Of course, you can talk about all of that if you want, but I particularly am curious about writes out of obedience.
Okay, well, it's basically a little bit of what I was just alluding to there. Is I before, as of last year, I had like 6 jobs. I'm like say I'm kind of a serial. I've got like rent houses that we manage. I'm a cabbie fashion stylist. I was on staff at my church as the parish programs coordinator. I'm a board member at our school. I'm a board member in our historic neighborhood. Like, I have a bunch of jobs, and I'm a wife and a mother, and and I edit for other authors, and I have a small publishing house that I've done vanity projects for other people. So yeah, I have a lot of different hats. But I was in a Bible study again way back before Wingspan, so that was 10 years ago, and they were talking about your passions and how your passions don't change. They're not a hobby. It's something that, God gives you and it's in your heart. And I was like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, I know what that is. It's to write a book. And at the time, like I say, I had a PR degree. I had a journalism degree. I'd been a press secretary. I'd written articles and speeches and all the things. I'd written my whole life, but I never wrote creatively, except for when I was young. And I said, I've always wanted to write a book, but I felt like that wasn't like the responsible thing to do, because nobody will hire you usually to do that. Although I've learned differently at WriterCon, you could maybe get hired to do those things. But also I just thought of that. It was a parable of the steward I don't know if everybody knows that, but it's where the master goes off, leaves 3 servants with a different amount of money, and one 10 and one 100 and one just one, and the one goes and buries it in the ground. And I thought, that's me. I take this thing he's given me and I've just buried it in the ground. And so that, I don't know, it's just like a light bulb on. It gave me not only like the permission to pursue that dream, but the responsibility to pursue that dream. So as you know, as an author, like you said, nobody's standing there telling you have to write every day, right? You don't have a boss, which is great, right? But it's also there's a tyranny of the urgent. Like, there's all these other people telling me I need to do all these other things. And so it's like, but no, I know that I need to be obedient to this call. And so that's the thing that's gotten me this far, because you guys know it's hard, and you need something that's pushing you. And so for me, it was like, no, God told me to do this and I need to do it.
Well, I can't think of a better note to go out on than that one. So Micah, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Just a few parting words before we go. It's 4 degrees today. I think we're maybe going to get up into the 20s, but all I can think about as I'm having my hot soup and my hot tea is sun and beaches and the cruise ship that we're going to be on in April for the WriterCon Cruise 2024. While relaxing and taking it easy is absolutely one of my favorite parts of this, the friendships that develop on the cruise, stick with me year after year after year. I've got connections that I made from our very first cruise back in 2020. Those people stick with me. They've become some of my closest writer friends. They beta read for me. It's something that it's a resource that I just don't think you can pick up anywhere else. And we spend so much time together that we really get to know each other and get to know each other's writing.
Yeah.
So if that sounds like something that could help you, I hope you'll check us out, writercon.com, and think about joining us in April.
Well said. There's educational stuff too, but and sharing and
I
editing.
will also be there. So
and
if you want
Jesse
to hang out
will
with
be
me,
there.
yeah.
But
And
make
Jess will be there.
friends.
I'll be there in a hot tub.
That's the day. Oh.
Meetings in hot tubs.
Getting to meet us in person, priceless.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Jesse will be in the hot tub with his iPad watching Star Trek.
That's right.
Or something, or whatever.
That's right.
All right, everybody. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.